writers group is handing out the hard copies of the anthology this Wednesday.
So you're gonna sign my copy?
No, I get a copy. You
don't.
Oh. Oh. So we're gonna play the exclusive Elite game.
He didn't write a story that contributed to the anthology, so yes.
I don't mind. It's not that what you think.
I suppose if you coughed up $5, they'd be happy to get
I bet you I could get a story better than yours. No, I didn't know what a snipe was.
Most people don't.
So I asked my father-in-law to talk snipes and say there were snipes on his hunting land.
Okay, we are live on our YouTube stream.
Leprechauns out there. It's almost the same thing.
We're going leprechaun hunting.
No guarantees on the quality of the audio or the stream here, since this was a ad hoc, so to speak, setup. Because we have simultaneously running our Twitch stream for RPG Research out of the studio in the garage, so we're also using twice as much bandwidth now. But hopefully we're up and running. We're recording locally, so I can always upload it later if it doesn't go to the right channel. But as far as I can tell, we're up and running. If you see somebody post something in the chat room here, let me know. I'll try to pull something up on my laptop to monitor. But
just make sure we don't screw up with getting it on camera.
So,
don't you remember the comment from Independence Day where they're in there with the alien? They're talking about how they're being recorded, and then all of a sudden the alien comes to life and throwing people across the room. So. That's the first image I got in my mind was
yes,
things gone bad.
Well, things gone bad. You're gonna have.
All right, so welcome to a Tolkien Society. This is our monthly meeting. This is March 16th, 2019, and Brian, our secretary, is unable to make it due to a family emergency. We wish him and his family all the best, that they come through that quickly and well. We will miss him. He did text me a few things to point out, discuss, whatever related to the notes. I have not had chance. I have been so overwhelmed with my projects that I'm way behind. I'm 3 months behind now on pretty much everything.
Do you want me to read the notes?
Let me see where the notes.
So I have not uploaded the notes. I do have the notes here on my laptop.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Me too.
if you guys have them, then feel free to read it instead of me.
My phone was.
If the audio is not good enough, let me know. I'll see if I can crank it up. Hopefully, it's not going to be as good a quality as before because we're not in the studio. It's just running off the Mac microphone. I do in the future I'll have this room wired back up for regular broadcasting because this is going to. I've got so many projects now. I'm starting to have to stream simultaneously twice more frequently. Because we're streaming 6 or 7 times a week just for RPG Research now.
Burdens of success.
Well, yeah. Now if it would just turn into donations, you know. The burdens of effort, at least, because between the Synthetic Zen streams and this and Tolkien Mood eventually and such, I need to have this wired for broadcasting.
Donations of success, I think, are a separate phase.
All right. Who wants to start with the notes?
In the fall. I have my wife to kill and Gilder to frame.
Yes, and actually, I do have a wedding to plan. This 4th of July, I get married.
Yes.
So, and we're going to New Orleans, the French Quarter,
Nice.
for our honeymoon. It was between Orcas Island and that. And we looked at Orcas Island and we're like, boring compared to
Not the
New
cliffs of.
What? I can't go out of the country. My passport. I still don't have a working passport. The State Department keeps denying me a passport.
Cliffs of insanity.
So.
Well, you're clearly.
The cliffs of insanity. Yes.
Where are the cliffs of insanity? Dover.
So, yeah. So it needed to be somewhere that I didn't need a passport, and so that limited our options. So Anyway, she's been in New Orleans before. She liked it. It's been a long time. She'd love to do more, and she'd get to stay very
When
long.
do you go?
Well, I'll get married on 4th of July.
So
It's
when is
traditional to go
Mardi Gras
afterwards.
down there? I'm
It's
always
not at the same time.
no. Okay. Thought maybe like
But,
you guys were
but
gonna
it's
get
still party set. The only thing that's going to suck is it's going to be the middle of July or early July. It's going to be freaking hot and humid. So we'll probably be out at night mostly. And even then it will be hot.
It is built in a swamp.
It is.
Well,
It is
eat my
indeed.
portion of
And then
southern
they built
food,
that city.
man.
That sank into the swamp. So then they built on top of that. That one fell over and fell into the swamp. So that one burned down, fell over and sank into the swamp. But the 5th one, that one, well, kind of
Launched
stayed until a
trucks
hurricane
of
came in and drowned it. But then they built.
Washington, D.C. is built in a swamp, too. It just hasn't fallen in yet.
Right.
No, ow.
Yeah, no kidding. The swamp. Is
Well, while you're
totally
down there,
taken
seriously, if
That's
you get a
why
chance
we're
to have
doing
some
it
gumbo,
spring break and not
something delicious.
Yeah, well, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna be doing jazz and blues. Because remember, I'm a musician,
Oh yeah.
right? I play over 20 instruments. I love blues and jazz. I like real jazz, not fusion,
Right.
funky.
yes, the
Real jazz.
stuff.
The
Yeah.
80s brought in the.
And it's gonna be Delta blues. Hello. I mean, because it's the Delta. So I'll be in music nirvana, and then we both are a bit foodies. We love food, so we will gain weight considerably on this honeymoon probably because we are going to enjoy it. Now neither of us can handle super hot spicy. I like flavor. Cajun style, we're gonna struggle a little bit, but we will do our best.
Yeah, I'm restricted on spice. Mom thinks pepper is too much.
You guys are all wimps.
Rude. Anyway, so that'll be, that's
See
part of
if
why
you get any
Tolkien
curry
Mood.
from me ever.
But this is relevant because that's why Tolkien Mood is bumped to September, because it's too close to the wedding and everything else. So remember that we're doing Tolkien Mood in
The
September.
only reason why I said that is I'm jealous of you getting to go south.
Thank you. That'll be my first time in New Orleans, so we won't be taking it by motorcycle. No, dead Jack Nicholson's. You know. Easy Rider.
Ah, okay.
All right. So who wants to cover the notes?
Well,
I need to.
I don't have a copy. He's
Well,
got a
I
copy. I
can
don't know.
read.
Okay, you can't.
So February 16th, 2019, attended Richard, Corey, Brian, myself, and Hawk. Brian read January 2019 notes, brief or lengthy, as it were, discussion. Hawk reported back RPG Research Board about the folding of Tolkien Moot and Tolkien scholars into RPG research. The board declined because of concern that Tolkien Enterprises, now Middle Earth Enterprises, would shut RPG research down. Rundown on the difference between Tolkien Estate and MEE. Therefore, RPG research is willing to help, or volunteer, or facilitate, as long as they don't receive funds. I shared the teaser trailer about Tolkien, the movie coming out. Corey expressed skepticism on how accurate the biographical film will be. We'll see. Various opinions expressed. Update,
No, we express opinions.
update on Amazon Prime's Tolkien show deal. The map has been released. Further maps have been released, but we'll go into that later. 3 rings for Elven Kings under the Sky. Yes, the poem is relevant. The clue that the Amazon series will focus on the time of the Middle Earth, where other things were forged. Ask Michael Martinez to attend and get his take on it. So I'm guessing that's not happening.
So Glorfindel of the House of the Golden Flower says, "Have a good stream. Sorry, I can't watch. My internet is killing me. So sorry. I don't know who."
Yeah.
Okay, sorry you can't join us. Hopefully you can watch the recorded
Yes.
version later, which we will upload recording later.
Richard referred to Extra Credit YouTube channel on Lord of the Rings, which I haven't watched yet. And then we did have a question about making Tolkien Society separate 501c3. Brian says no. Chris is undecided. And then continued reading The Fall of Gondolin, starting on page 41 and ending on page 50. Tours, journey, the swans motif, and the contrast between the version and the final published version in the Silmarillion. Arundel, fun fact, poem about Arundel, 1914, struck by beauty, euphonic to a great degree. Next meeting today, March 16th.
Thank you for that.
Is there anything we want to cover?
So, quick introductions. I'm Hawk Robinson, founder of the A.I. Tolkien Society.
Our fearless leader, Corey?
I don't know about fearless.
Okay, brave.
Chickening out and running away. Chris Cooperstein, just renewed my membership with the society last week.
Good.
I'm Richard Baldwin. They just wandering off the street one day and let me stay.
The society has increased their membership over the last year 21%.
Well, I bet with the movies and everything, and now the Amazon thing coming, that should keep it going.
Yeah,
I think the 50th anniversary also has
Sure.
something to do
Oh,
with
yeah,
it.
no, there are lots of variables
Yes.
to keep it going.
Well, you have to admit, even though some people like me don't necessarily like the films as much as the books,
It brings in new
it
people.
does
fresh
bring in
blood.
a lot of people that have never
Yep,
heard about Tolkien.
it does. Some people will go ahead and pick up a book. A vast minority nowadays compared to before, but some people will go pick up the books. And so that's some benefit.
I'm just worried that somehow it's going to get chewed up in the money machine and we're just going to end up with something
Yeah,
that's
well, yeah, if they make it like The Hobbit,
Bastardization.
if they do it like The Hobbit, where it's just a video game, that would be very sad. Very, very sad. Here's hoping that doesn't happen.
Complete with Mario jumping
Yeah.
sound effects.
Oh my god.
I was thinking of it. Doink, doink.
Getting the coins.
CinemaSins did a scene where he took the one with Legolas jumping from stone to stone as it was collapsing under him and put in
Oh, okay.
Mario jumping sound effects.
So Brian's asking for a link. So you can join us through our stream, because YouTube now has the chat room working. Since they got rid of Google Hangouts, the chat room works in the live stream on YouTube. So it's much more like Twitch now. So if you just go to youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars, and then when we're live, you can click, you scroll down, you see the live by the video, the very first video in the lower left. You can click on that, and then it shows the chat room there.
Are you hesitant to praise it too highly? Whether or not it
I'm
ends
not
up coming
praising,
back?
I'm not giving any opinion.
What I'm saying is that it's working out for once. It's not stuck.
Now you jinxed us.
Oh, did I?
Corey, what have you done?
I knew it. I knew I'd say
Here was,
something. It'd be my
in
fault.
addition to the notes that Brian sent, so I was supposed to invite Michael Martinez to a discussion at Tolkien Society about the Amazon Prime revelations via Twitter, which I didn't have time. I'm sorry. As I said, I'm 3 months behind on everything now. When I went back to Amazon's feed to copy the link, the updates are worth looking at, especially the quote, "Welcome to the Second Age."
Yes. OneRing.net has a decent summary.
Okay.
Amazon's Prime's new map welcomes us to the second age. This was released 1 week ago.
Second Age.
Correct.
Really?
Correct.
Yeah.
They got permission to do the Second Age.
Well,
Presumably.
It's still considered
The map-
outside
Is
of the
this
Silmarillion.
rumor mill or is
the
this an
map
announcement?
has Numenor on it.
Yeah.
for Amazon. Well, but they might just be using that artistically.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, they're
Have they said this story is going to be set in the Second Age? Because the last thing we heard, they said it was going to be right between the end of the Hobbit and the beginning of the Lord of the Rings.
Earlier today,
Yeah.
this is the 7th, Amazon Prime revealed yet another map of Middle Earth along with the text completing the ring verse. Then these words, "Welcome to the Second Age."
That would be freaking awesome. Because the Second Age is epic.
True to these words, the new map reveals Numenor, which sunk beneath the ocean
That
near
would
the
be
end of the
freaking
Second
awesome.
Age. So, we'll see.
Yeah.
Because,
because isn't the Silmarillion mostly about
This
the
is
first
something
age,
that
right?
First and Second Age.
Yes.
Is that
It's everything
map of
before
Numenor
Yes,
real
but
art,
in
or is it derived
It's about
from
First and Second Age.
I thought the
previous
Second
works?
Age was included at the very, very, very.
Well,
And-
it depends on the
it
stories
was-
jump. Remember, the stories kind of jump a little.
Well, I'm just saying, is like
Yeah.
the Silmarillion was mainly about the
Well,
first age, and then
Numenor-
after the
Numenor is
After
in the Silmarillion.
right. But isn't there
Yeah.
some of that's posted at the very end of
The-
in one of the appendixes for the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit? Isn't that put in the appendix?
No, only references to it, not anywhere near the full.
I'm
content.
almost certain that there's a lot of Numenor reference.
There's
in the-
references.
I'm just
in
curious
the-
if they
in the
made up their
appendix.
own map
Just
of
little
Numenor, or if
bits.
they're using one
It's
that they
mostly
got
the
off the internet.
Silmarillion, and
that
That's what I
because
was
the new management decided that
that'd be
that
awesome.
was-
Show it to Hawk.
Because I mean, I've written a bunch of modules for that period, so there's lots of great content. It is a very epic period. It is a bigger period. Things are much more powerful than in the Third Age.
well, you know.
Okay, so Brian's comments here. Since the latest reveal on Amazon's Lord of the Rings Twitter feed, we now know they are indeed setting this in Second Age. Well, do we know that? I mean, is this an official thing that says we are doing Second Age, or are they saying that they're going to be doing flashbacks? I mean, we don't.
Well,
we don't know.
I mean,
think
the,
people-
the words "Welcome to the Second Age"
great.
from them.
Okay, well, fingers crossed. I
Okay.
hope it is true.
It's not like
But-
they would play with you for
but
marketing
We've been
purposes.
fooled before through hype machines. Keep that in mind. With
He's
Numenor
the
and
skeptical one this
You're
time.
saying that Amazon is relying on AI too much? No.
Yeah, inconceivable. I think the clues of the lines of the poem point to perhaps several seasons about the forging of the many rings by Sauron and Celebrimbor. Their ambition may be the entire Akalabeth, so that's Numenor, and that's Silmarillion. Their ambition may be the entire Akalabeth, but I think they'll start with Sauron's plot to pretend friendship with the Noldor. That would be awesome. That'd be a great way to bookend, make the
Yes.
movies make a lot more sense.
Yes.
Because people don't know that.
And we get to see his pretty face.
He says, apologies for conflating time on my previous comment. Rings made in early Third Age. No.
Right.
He's made, okay. I checked and actually I wasn't off on my dates. The Rings of Power were made in Second Age 15 to 1600, Drowning in Numenor Second Age 3319. Right, so you've got a few thousand years there
Yeah.
to work with. Huge amount of time, so lots of time for episodic stories, perhaps organized by each story arc and differences. Yeah, Second Age would be awesome.
I'm just thinking
I've
that the war.
that's why I've said a lot of my homebrew stuff in
Isn't-
Second Age.
Isn't it the war where the Silmarils where it changed the whole Earth? What I was trying to get at is that I wonder if they don't consider Second Age, the untouchable stuff may be the stuff that happens up to the time that the Valar decide to fight and it alters the world. Like the Second
Right.
Age is such a small, like it's not expounded upon
Correct.
in Tolkien's
Correct.
quite as
Which gives you
as
lots
detailed.
to work with. Oh, Second Age, he gives a ton.
Well, yes, he gives a lot of detail, but not to the extent that
but
the
it
first
leaves a
age
lot.
had.
Well, I understand, but that's why that is great to add to.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to say that I think that's what I was trying to say is I bet you that the reason why the first age is considered
Okay, but
untouchable.
I don't think you understand what a big deal this is licensing wise. Until now, if this is true, that means they got permission from the Tolkien estate.
Well, that's
Because
probably
all the movie
true, though.
licenses were only for The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and role-playing games and everything, movies, all content were restricted from using Second Age content, except for what was in the appendices of Lord of the Rings. If it wasn't in the appendices of Lord of the Rings, they couldn't touch it. It was outside of the license of Middle Earth Enterprises / Tolkien Enterprises.
So
So they can either
there's a
only
theory.
do
There's a theory.
what's in the appendices of Lord of the Rings,
Right.
or they got permission from the Tolkien estate to finally do the Silmarillion and
What would
history of
be
Middle Earth and all of that.
refresh my memory? What's in the appendices?
So Tolkien wouldn't sell the Lord of the Rings. He wouldn't give it to the publishers
appendices,
without the Silmarillion.
Right.
That's part of why it took him 13 years to get the Lord of the Rings out. He tried even going to remember we read the letters, he tried a different publisher to get them to accept it with the
Yes,
Silmarillion.
the
Because
short note.
he kept saying, you won't understand the story if you don't have the context of reading the Silmarillion first.
Right.
And they went, no, this is too much. So he went back to Alan Unwin or whatever, and he said, okay, fine, but can I put some appendices in so that Weathertop and the Ring and the whole story of Aragorn and Arwen makes sense with pieces explaining, at least pieces, that I can stick in the appendices of the key parts.
Okay, so
And so that's why he did that.
what wasn't the story? Which elf was it that she's half Valar, whatever? He ends up going and getting a ring, but he loses a body part in the process of
Beren and Luthien.
Beren and Luthien
Yes.
was included in the movies by Jackson.
They
Very
didn't-
little
they didn't-
piece, but there
All,
was the.
all they had was Aragorn telling a little bit of the tale, which was in the Lord of the Rings. Because in the Lord of the Rings,
But that was in the
campfire and
appendices,
Weathertop.
wasn't it?
Okay, no, not the story, not the whole story. The whole
Well, I didn't
story ended
remember.
about
I didn't
Silmarillion.
remember in the Fellowship of the Ring him ever talking about Beren and Luthien.
Yeah, when they were at Weathertop, he tells the story of Beren and
Yeah.
Luthien, and he is reminiscing about the story between Arwen and himself, because it's an intentional parallel.
Yes.
I don't know. That seemed like a pretty big door opening for somebody to take a bunch
That's
of.
why Tolkien said you need to read the Silmarillion first, because then you would understand the significance of Aragorn.
No, I'm
that
saying
story.
like copyright wise, I would think that
But it
would be
was-
like a door opening to
But
reach back into the and bring
But
stuff out of the.
They didn't show us Beren and Luthien. They had Aragorn telling the story very briefly, just telling it verbally around a
From
campfire.
personal experience.
Yeah,
I thought he was singing.
yeah, but it's whatever. It was still just telling the story.
Okay.
You
I
didn't
thought-
see Beren and Luthien dressed up as Dragluin and Wethrir, the bat and the werewolf, sneaking in to steal the ring from Morgoth, the Silmaril from Morgoth and stuff.
Right.
Which wouldn't that be of it? So it could be that they're using as much of the loophole of the appendices as they can get away with.
Brings up a question: how do you dress up as
They took the skin.
They killed the one.
He says they killed it, skinned it, put it over, and then she used her illusion magic to enhance it and make him look like a werewolf, wearing the hame of the Kalkaroth
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's.
or whatever. All right.
I think we've killed that.
So when somebody threatens to skin you and wear it like a cloak,
Yes.
they're not kidding.
Well, it depends who says it to. Some people might be kidding. Some people might be big for their britches. Others might be literal. So do we? Let's see. What do we have as far as a point of order? Now, Chris, you said you had something, or was that it already?
That
I
was
something.
Pretty much it.
Well, and then we had the thing on birds last month. That you
Yes,
gave me.
you did. You did your homework assignment.
I did my homework assignment.
Awesome.
Okay, so
All right.
we were talking about Tolkien's love of birds
Right.
and swans specifically.
Yes.
And I said that there was a quote that I couldn't remember where it was at. I went and it took me a while to look it up because I couldn't remember what piece of literature, but it was actually on fairy stories.
Okay.
And he says, some are pardonable weaknesses of curiosity. He's talking about things that could happen in fairy stories.
Mm-hmm.
Such as the desire to visit free as a fish the deep sea. And he says, almost in reverie, the longing for the noiseless, gracious, economical flight of a bird, that longing which the aeroplane cheats, except in rare moments, seen high and by wind and distance, noiseless, turning into the sun. That is precisely when imagined and not used. So he's very detailed about this idea about birds, and just this idea of them turning into the sun, and their quiet. That so the idea was that he spent a lot of time. I think one of his other ones was the farmer, not the farmer Giles, the other one. I can't think of it right at the moment. Smith the Wooten had a very big piece of when these birds flew by him, flew at him or whatever, and so you see the motif of swans,
Yes.
quite a bit because they are white. I actually saw a picture one time of them against a glassy water, but it's black, and they're white against the background. And I think that that's kind of Tolkien's big thing, was that the white swan was because at the end the boat that flew, right? I don't know the name of it, but the one that Arendelle had.
Wasn't it Vinya something? It was.
Yeah, that Arendelle had.
Yeah, Arendelle. Yeah.
Right, and it had a Silmaril.
Remember, because we're the Tolkien Society,
Right.
and it's Rendell.
Arendelle.
So you want to have that extra syllable.
Well, the Silmaril was attached to it.
I mean, isn't it Arendelle or is it? Yeah, it's
Arendelle. I'll trust you on that. But the Silmaril was attached to the front of the boat, I believe, right?
Yeah, the beacon
and so the idea that
star, yeah.
Well, the idea was that when the swans are turned towards the sun or whatever, it's almost like a rising, because in the book he's a rising of a star. So I mean, you got to think of like the sun rising.
Well, it was his.
Then,
it was his mythology for Venus. It was his myth, right, for the morning star, which
But
is
it's
Venus.
also that same picture shows up with I forget which bird carrying Rover to the moon. Same thing.
In Roverandom.
Yes.
I can't remember what it was that took him up there.
I'm thinking like
Unfortunately, all the books are in the
albatross
studio.
or something like that. But the idea is, the long moonbeam coming across the ocean and the bird riding the moonbeam off the edge of the earth towards the moon. Yeah.
There's just this. I think he spent a lot of time. I don't know, out in the weather, obviously, looking at
Ryan joined
trees.
us.
and trees and.
Yay.
I couldn't.
That's sign language for clapping.
There are.
No, this is sign language for clapping.
Yeah.
Not that. This.
But you got to think about the fact that in Britain, the swan, he had to be out on the lake and seeing these birds just like land
These
with
are powerful
with
moments
near.
for him that stuck in his
Yeah.
mind.
Actually, Corey, I want to point out something.
Please.
The aircraft was used in World War I for buzzing the trenches.
Yes.
So that's probably where his distaste for the noise of the aircraft comes from.
Well, and watching this aircraft be shut down, watching the pilots die, watching, this was piston aircraft time.
Yeah.
This was
Very loud.
He died before the jet age had fully taken off.
Well, but he also.
Who, Tolkien?
That applying the jet age fully to aircraft, commercial aircraft that I know the 747 had just come out by the time he had died.
Well, because we were, popular transit start was in the 50s with the they were
Right,
starting
those
to
were
transition.
piston aircraft.
No, but they were already transitioning by the 60s into the jet stuff. thought.
I'm thinking more on the consumer
Yeah.
side.
Well, he was
Yeah.
anyway. He was border. Wasn't he considered border? Sometimes leaning to a Luddite kind of thing.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, so but
not kind of.
well, okay. I'm not gonna get out. I'm not gonna argue that.
His ideal was
but
Hobbiton.
Imagine though.
That's the level of
It's almost like a
he's happy
kite.
with.
It's almost like a kite that doesn't have a string. It just kind of back and forth moves across the horizon, and it's just how does when you're watching birds, I mean, just that kind of quiet, I mean, the closest thing I can imagine is one night there was an owl at our house, and owls are notoriously quiet, and it's just amazing to see something leap from a tree
Oh yeah.
and glide almost without
Yeah,
noise.
because their feathers are buffered to specifically be quiet to ambush, because they are ambush predators.
Right.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine what Tolkien was thinking, like I said, almost in reverie when he's watching these birds. So, and he calls it, and I think it's kind of funny that he says it about himself. He says it's a pardonable weakness or curiosity. I think he was talking about himself when he said it's a pardonable weakness or curiosity when he talks about the flight of the bird,
Mm-hmm.
So he knew how not to take himself seriously. Sometimes he was able to.
That varied. That definitely varied.
Well, he was able to poke fun at himself a
Yes.
little.
He was a
Oh, yeah.
professor on ancient dead languages.
He was often self-deprecating. Yes, indeed. It's part of his appeal.
But that was, I don't know. I felt
Well,
like
thank you
maybe-
very much for finding that, researching that. I really appreciate that. It's good
Should we clap?
because we've been really bad about our follow-up on our assignments and those things. So thank you for being on top of it.
Should we give Corey a hand?
You're a better man than I, Gungadin. Yeah, everybody, American Sign Language class,
Chris goes.
which is starting in an hour and a quarter out at the North Town Mall courtyard, and then an hour after that at the Rocket Bakery in Garland, or Spokane ASL. SpokaneASL.com.
And
Richard,
now,
did
for
you
your
have
regular
anything-
scheduled advertising?
Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to bring up?
Just I'm getting the hard copy for the anthology. That
Hard copy for the anthology.
I published a short story for an anthology that was being put out by the writers group I go to,
Mhm.
and they're
Oh yeah, that's cool.
they're
When's that?
they're publishing. Well, it's out on the virtual copies already out.
The
But the authors are getting their hard copies this Wednesday.
Sweet. Sweet.
So he can have something to prop up his chair at home.
No, it's something I can beat you over the head with, Corey.
Corey, what?
It's something
No,
I
I'm
can beat
just-
Corey over the head
No,
with.
I was just saying it was a hard object that he could use. I wasn't insulting his writing.
Well, no, but that's
I'm
usually what that
sorry.
means. If you
Gosh.
say if you use it as a doorstop, that usually means
Well,
it's
that's because he's been
worthless.
selling all of his on his e-copies. He hasn't sold a single hard copy, but he sold a bunch of e-copies.
Because they don't have a hard copy yet.
Well,
Yeah, it's kind of hard to sell something
in
that
the
doesn't
day,
exist.
this day of self-publishing, it's all online mostly, anyways. Yes, no,
No, it's a mix.
No.
It's a mix.
Because I don't
So, for example, I have like the RPG research content. I have tons and tons of papers and essays and small books online for free. I still have people saying, "Would you please put together a hard copy version of this book for our
Mhm.
school, for my shelf,
Right.
for reference,
Right.
for they want physical copies.
all right.
Paper is not dead.
Yes.
I would like papers to be
I'm
dead.
sorry,
in
I
book
wasn't
form.
really trying to
I
make
have,
fun of
I have
it.
an image for you.
Gosh,
You have what?
I
stick my
have
foot
an
in it.
image for
An
you.
image for me? Okay.
Insert.
Yeah, I wish
in the
paper
mouth too big or
workflow
something
was
so
dead. Was all digital instead of because I mean they're still printing it out, signing it, scanning it in, then then printing out a hard copy to ship to the archives under the mountains. You know, there's
Well,
computers
I
still
like
doing
hard
that
copies, but
by
I
the
thought
millions of pounds.
I like hard copies, but the
What do we got?
library lately has been short on hard copies and long on e-text.
What is it?
3 weeks ago, we went to IKEA
Oh, bookshelves.
and we got 7 bookshelves.
Nice.
And
It's your entire wall. This is your
And
new
5
house
of
down
them
in-
So are you issuing book cards for borrowing the books?
yes,
So you got them with some assembly required.
yes, and 5 of them are filled, and a 6th one out in the kids area.
See, and I still like having a DVD or VHS instead of
Yes.
streaming.
Well,
Because streaming, if your internet's acting up, or it's choking, or they claw it back, or it's not available
my
that year.
my issue is rights.
Yeah,
I own it.
right. Streaming, you don't own anything.
That's right.
Exactly. And the clawback thing, like with Kindle and stuff. How many
Well,
clawback
and,
stuff
and,
all the
and
time.
what digital movie vault just folded?
What?
I'll look it up.
Brian says IKEA is owned by Saruman.
Is that why the assembly
His mind is made of metal and gears.
You cut down the forest frenzy beams to make furniture.
Oh, no, keep going. I'll find it.
Okay. Any more? What do you have a date on that yet, Richard?
That's the 27th, and then there's a book signing that we haven't gotten a firm commitment on yet.
Okay.
So, and that's going to be local.
I wish there was more. I wish I was more in touch with more news worthy of Tolkien. Well, connected to Tolkien.
Well, you got to
I
come
wish
out of
there
your
was-
cave more often.
No,
in order
I
to get that.
do look up stuff. I do have some geek connections.
Okay, so we had a lot of activity through the Google Plus Hangout for the Tolkien communities. But of course, Google Plus Hangout, not Hangout, Google Plus is completely shutting down. So all those groups that have been active for years and years and years are going away, and where do they go? Some are just shutting down. Most don't want to go to Facebook.
No.
If they were on Google, they were there because they didn't want to be on Facebook for a whole slew of reasons. So they've gone to a number of different ones, and one of them is WeMe.com. So a lot of these groups have moved to WeMe.com, some have gone to some others, which are open, free platforms that don't have all the spying and restrictions and everything else that Facebook has. So that's where you can find some of these Tolkien Society groups to go hang out with, and they share all this news. And because it's not on Facebook or Google, it's a lot less invasive and spammy. And it's much more about freedom of speech and stuff like that.
Well, I appreciate that.
So-
I mean, I find that
So WeMe.com.
you guys have been the. I know this sounds weird, but the
Lifeline?
snowflake in the avalanche of good things that have happened in my life, and you guys don't understand that, but maybe, but just being here and making friends with you guys
So
and
glad.
Yeah, it's.
I'm sorry, Corey. I'll have to end our friendship.
Yeah, right. You wouldn't if you could.
Movies Anywhere
Okay.
by Disney
Yeah.
is closing.
Okay. I don't
What?
know what.
They're transitioning to movies nowhere.
Movies to Disney.
Movies Anywhere is moving to Movies Nowhere.
But they're kind of changing the terms of service as that gets shuttered and your movies get moved to
I wonder if that has to do
Disney
with the
streaming
Redbox
anywhere.
lawsuit.
and some other things.
And now that's being shut down.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is a
Yet another reason why to buy DVDs, Blu-ray.
yes.
Well, I don't even like Blu-ray because Blu-ray does updates every time you run it, and there's all sorts of problems there.
I have an early enough version of the player
It doesn't.
that
push
it
it.
doesn't push.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't allow it to hook up to the internet. And
Right.
The only issue that I've run into is
Newer Blu-rays you might not be able to read without the update.
the issue that I'm running into is Dolby Digital 501 versus Dolby Atmos.
Okay.
Not being able to read the proper audio stream and having to back down to standard stereo.
Okay.
So I may experiment with the update after backing it up.
All right. Brian says, one laser disc to rule them all. One laser disc to bind them.
Yes, you remember laser discs.
Yeah, and unfortunately they suffered from laser rot like the early CDs.
They were cool.
So, and those of you who don't know what laser rot is, either if you played them, they would eventually quit working, or if they sat around, they would eventually quit working.
So
That's a problem.
So I talked to a friend who works at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, and my dad was as he was retiring, they were digitizing everything.
Good.
But they were digitizing them to these gold-plated discs for optical storage because they were rightly scared of EMP.
Right.
You need it to be optical
Right.
instead of magnetic.
Right. Yeah.
And so one of my friends who works there right now said, yeah, we are going through a testing process 20 years later.
Wow.
And we're finding that about 5% of them have died.
From rot. Laser.
Correct.
Laser rot. Yeah.
Even though
I
they
didn't even
were
know that was
perfect
possible.
I guess the
temperature
clear optical
storage
coating
with
is
no
degraded.
light.
The
Yeah.
backing, once it's exposed to the heat that creates the formatting, it has little imperfections, and over time the oxidation deteriorates.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, see, I feel bad when you guys
it's,
talk.
there's a no win. There's like, it doesn't matter what you do.
So
It's a real problem.
they're transitioning back to paper storage in this day and age. They're going to keep the digital copy, but they're going to also keep paper records of the important reference documents like
for the documents.
I wonder if you could
certain
encode
types of
videos.
Well, so I used to manage jukeboxes, like not music jukeboxes, but they call jukeboxes. They were huge robotic arm-controlled laser disc
yes,
drives,
Uh-huh.
and some of them were entire buildings.
Yeah.
You had a laser arm, you can grab it and then stick it in the player for you, and for these massive, huge databases. And I used to be an admin for a number of these because of OCR, optical calibration.
Yes.
And but the way they address those is they've got redundancy, right? Often almost everything has a duplicate of itself as a backup.
Correct.
And it's got buffers, and I mean they're just hugely redundant.
Yes.
And I've said that several times. So
and it is the same for audio on. I read the technical manual for audio for 35 millimeter film, where the audio was printed on the outside of the teeth, plus inside the middle of each tooth, and it was, even if you lost 90% of the visibility of it, it would still play the audio.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Meanwhile, get back to more Tolkien-esque so, are there any more announcements of any more books?
I have not heard any.
Because we know Christopher Tolkien said, "Oh, it's my last one." Okay, no, this is my last one.
No, really.
Okay, no, really, this is my last one. He has officially stepped down, though, right? He's finally actually stepped down. That doesn't mean he won't. I mean,
were you entrusted with the Fall of Gondolin from Brian? Was that you?
No.
Or is
No,
that your
Brian took
copy?
it.
This was a gift from my wife.
Oh, okay, that's your
Who-
copy.
That's his copy.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
Why are you trying to give away Christmas
I'm
copies?
not. Yeah, I really wish I had the money to buy the copy. I screwed up and I should have bought it this last.
Brian says 80s tech rules. Brian says, has The Lord of the Rings been printed in Braille? I think so.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I know the Hobbit's been printed in Latin.
Braille bookstore lists it. Lord of the Rings trilogy.
No.
It is in Braille. It is, so The Hobbit is $70. Fellowship of the Ring, $140. Two Towers, $115. Return of the King, $98. And Lord of the Rings Appendices, $40.
$40 for just the
So,
appendices? Wow.
A Braille printer is thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah.
And you have to do these big folders of paper. So the paper alone costs a lot.
Yeah.
Well, you would think that they would get to a point where they could produce some sort of, kind of like a plastic drying polymer or something that would work, that would be a little bit easier
There have
to.
been so many experiments with so many technologies. So for one that's really cool, that's really having great progress, is the tongue, what the heck they call it? It's called the.
You read
I
with
did,
your tongue.
I did whole
so
things on this.
you
You
can
read
eat.
with your tongue. You see. You walk around seeing with your tongue.
Wow, that's
It's
an
called.
author's.
This is all
author's dream.
neuroscience things. It's all about neuroplasticity.
They were doing some stuff with
Called the.
thing in the back, on your back.
Come on, what's it called? There's a name for it. Yeah. Talking about it. Tell me the name.
That's classified.
I'm drawing a blank on the name, and this article is going on and on. So, like a blind person was able to ride a bike with it. This article is not giving the name.
Well, they assume everybody knows.
So I never knew. This is a question I want to ask. Where did Tolkien live specifically?
Brainport. The Brainport. That's what it was. Oh, and they got FDA approval.
Oh.
Where did Tolkien
Excellent.
live during his time as a? Okay, so there was, the joke is that the original part of the Fellowship of the Ring, when you start at the beginning, he has the not the neighbors, the relatives that were always bothering him. I can't think of their names right at the moment. The Lobelia and
Sackville Baggins.
yeah, the Sackville Baggins. Now, in his real life, was there
Parallels to that?
parallels to the relatives coming by the house, waiting for him to essentially? I'm not talking about the Tolkien estate necessarily,
No,
so
but
much as
He never got along
as
with his
like-
guardian.
As a kid, I don't believe there was. As an adult, once The Hobbit became famous, he was frustrated by the people coming by his house all the time, taking pictures, hanging on the bell, things like that.
But
He
where
expressed
did
a
he
lot of
live?
frustration. He lived near Oxford, right? By then, was he still in the smaller place between? It depends on where he lived different places.
I have a hard time trying to imagine it. What I'm trying to ask you is like, was it like one of those buildings like you see in the
he just
Full
lived
House where it's
he
like
lived in
a
a house.
stack of?
No.
Here,
or-
Tolkien's house.
No, most
He
Most
lived in
pictures.
like three of them, three main ones. I think
most
said.
college professors during that time period were given houses as
Yeah.
part of the.
So like Whitworth here has some of those
yeah,
houses. They're just
Whitworth
like that.
owns a
They're
bunch of
converted
houses.
So here's 20 Northmore Road, Oxford, home to Tolkien family between 1930 and 37.
So was he like down the lane? Did he have like rock walls
Well,
up
here,
to his
so
house?
this is 30 to 37.
Oh, okay.
So
he
that was
had
30 to 37 in Oxford, but it changed, right?
Yeah.
So that was just 30 to 37.
Like,
That looks like it had a pretty decent gate enclosing the garden there. Then.
Yeah.
So
that doesn't stop people from
yeah.
no.
carrying over and opening it, and
You mean dropping their eaves?
exactly.
I
Like,
didn't hear much of consequence. Just
So
something about a
here's
dark
so
lord in the
West
ring.
Park and then Oxford. Here's two of the places right there. Westmore and Oxford are two of the places he lived.
Okay. I just thought I couldn't imagine what his house looked like. I thought maybe he
Yeah,
lived in the
there's pictures.
city. I thought maybe you lived like
Merton
in the city.
College. He was English from 45 to 59.
I was thinking like an apartment, but
Here's
I
the
didn't know.
Eagle and Child Pub, Oxford, where the Inklings met, which I think Brian has been to.
The
This is
pub?
The pub.
He's been there?
The Eagle and Child Pub, where the Inklings used to meet.
Yes.
I think Brian's been there.
Thank you.
Well, Chesterton used to joke that his favorite book was God and Beer.
Holy Christ. So this is the wiki. This is the wiki page for J.R.R. Tolkien. It is really freaking long. That is a really long wiki page. I'm still scrolling. Wow.
Well, that's because
It has 232 references. Oh, Michael Martinez is in there. Yay! Well, there was a real. They used to blacklist him. People used to delete all his content on Wikipedia years ago. There were people who didn't like him, individuals that were high up in Wikipedia. So.
us
Glad to
Tolkien
see
fans
him
may
back.
not be as large as the Marvel fans, but we can definitely be very detailed in our
like our fan.
Wait, what are you talking about? We're always writing short notes.
Yeah, short notes.
The letter. By the way, Brian, if you reply yes, I don't have context. I don't know what you're saying yes to, so it helps if you say yes about or regarding this yes. The way chat is there because there's a delay, there's a latency.
He likes to nod to
So,
himself.
Brian, did you see the Tolkien Society post about Tolkien's Chaucer manuscript? I heard a rumor, but I haven't seen it. No.
Chaucer.
If you can post a link to it, that would be helpful. Brian says yes to something.
Oh, he was
I
probably
think
saying
yes,
yes,
to
he'd
the pub.
been to the
I'm
pub.
guessing, but I don't know. Oh yeah, he says it's quite small actually. Is it like when we were at Rocket Bakery up north before it turned into the Hammer, Thomas Hammer
I
thing, like
didn't-
that little nook that we were in, the yellow nook when we used to Tolkien Society there? The Eagle and Child sells T-shirts now, but the locals don't appreciate the
Did
photo
Tolkien say much
They
about
don't appreciate
Chaucer?
the photo taking.
Did
Yeah, he didn't.
he didn't
he
like
care for
Chaucer.
it, right? He
Yeah,
didn't like it,
I was thinking that that was one of the few authors he really kind of
Yep.
because Chaucer was a little.
Well, remember, he used to also
Right.
like George MacDonald, and when they asked him to write a preface, much like Richard did for the anthology, he reread it and went, "Oh, now I can't stand
wasn't a
it."
preface. I wrote a short story.
Yeah, but I thought you said you were writing the
No.
preface to the anthology.
No, I didn't
Oh,
say that.
oh, I'm
Oh no!
Sorry.
And
I'll
the
be right
crab-
back. I'm gonna get my copy of that.
Do you mind if I have some of these
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yes, I do. You opened it
I accidentally opened it.
accidentally.
No, I
Your
thought it was.
fingers
I
were
thought,
on.
I thought it had dice in it.
It was
That's
an
why I asked
accident.
before you opened somebody else's stuff. These were gifts
I thought they
from
were.
another nonprofit.
It was an accident.
Well,
My
now I know
fingers
what they
didn't
look
know
like
what they were
inside.
doing.
At least I asked. I didn't just.
For profit.
I just didn't down it in front of you and be
you
like.
want one now?
Then said Tour.
It was an
It
accident.
seems
My
like
fingers didn't know
I
what I was doing.
consistently break
I
rules
was-
around
I was
here of good
accident-
etiquette.
I was accidentally on purpose.
It's like a Kender keeping it safe.
I'm never gonna live it down.
We don't have to live like.
We have video evidence.
Well,
Thanks a lot.
the opposite.
That's what I said. I told you. If we screw up, we haven't recorded.
The opposite of that is Smaug, who just hoards everything.
Yeah.
Boxes were the only part of it he wanted.
So yes.
So Smog really didn't care about the gold. He was just after the containers.
That's right. That's right. He only wanted the chest. He didn't want the gold inside the chest. Smog was,
Generous.
yeah. I always wonder, when he was there a little bit of his other dragon, the dragon from Giles.
Uh-huh.
I wonder, was there any relation between those two dragons? Did they have any? Because one was
did they
obviously
have any children.
No.
Did they have children?
No, I mean, like, do you think that when he wrote the dragon, do you think that dragon had a similar I don't know, like character. Character is what I'm trying to say. You know, similar motivation. It's just that he's in a comic, comedic story instead of, is this what would happen if Smog was attacked by a farmer? You know.
It's more, that story is more whimsical and less
Yes.
ruthless than Smog was.
But the dragon was still pretty ruthless, because if you look at what he did, if it wasn't for the fact that the farmer had Tailbiter, the sword,
Yes.
that, and the fact that Giles was smart enough to get him to carry some gold, it wouldn't have. I think poor Giles would have been eaten pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Smog would have put up with that.
Well, I'm done with Tolkien's Beowulf section, so certainly there is some connection. I'm seeing some connections between Beowulf and Farmer Giles.
In regards to the dragon, the demon, or the Grendel?
Both.
All three?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got.
I think of
remember
Grendel's
the
mother as a demon, I suppose.
But also the king, to some extent. The king being the snot-nosed person who Giles kicks out.
Oh, right.
Effectively.
The king decided, because he was king, he decided he
None
deserved...
shall pass. Oh.
None shall pass. No,
Since Hawk isn't in the room at the moment, I want to ask this question. When the Bible says it's shame when a slave takes over as king, as Giles taking over as king, was that quite in the same vein as Proverbs' quote on the slave becoming king? Or
no,
whatever?
I'm thinking that's kind of like. I would imagine that Tolkien had at that point read enough of the history of Wales and the history of Scotland to know that there were periods of time where the Welsh and the Scottish had just thumbed their nose at the king in London, never paid their taxes as a whole group, and the king comes up to ask for taxes politely,
Right.
or not so politely, and been run off.
Right. Well, I always think it's impressive how didn't the Scottish, like, during the time of not the guy from Braveheart. I'm sorry,
Sure.
Not the original. Obviously, that's
Right.
not a real William. But the thing was, they had Scottish noblemen
who were vassals of the king.
Right, but Scottish.
They were powerless.
Right. My point being is weren't the Scottish vassals, weren't they one step up from a country knight? Well, I mean, they pretty much didn't have anything to their name to really be noblemen. The only difference between them and the farmer was like nothing, right?
Right. Right.
Just kind of more or less like your name was written out on paper.
And they didn't want anything more.
Right.
Because they didn't want the trappings of knighthood, kingship,
right.
responsibility. They just wanted to be left alone to their own farms, and they left their people alone. And the only time they actually got up to fight was to keep the king at bay.
Well, when the Israelites invaded Canaan, there's this long list of 15 kings of the city-states that are peppered all around. You know, like every city had its own king.
We were discussing the the Giles and the Scotsman nobleman, and how Giles is kind of like a Scotsman nobleman.
Okay. Brian says, yes, pub about the size as Old Rocket Bakery. Okay, yeah. So when we were there, we used to meet there. Now, you were asking about how much of Baron and Luthien was in the appendices.
I was, but I couldn't remember exactly how much.
I don't know exactly either, so I'm taking a quick look. So the Númenórean kings are listed. The House of Eor, Durin's folk, the Tale of Years, family trees of the hobbits, calendars, pronunciation of words and names, writing the languages of people of third age, on translation, then indexes. We have songs and verses, persons, beasts and monsters, places, things.
Isn't there?
And that's it for the appendices.
With that,
So they mention the people, and he does like little. He'll have like a name and have a short little description for each of them. He didn't have.
could they, under the license, take the list of Numerian kings and pick one out and do his?
So
life
like
story?
Durin's folk, he did a lot of excerpts. He's got little story snippets and such, with Azog and stuff like that. He's got actual dialogue and Aragorn and Denethor.
Azog is in the appendices.
Yeah.
I thought he was completely
saw
made
him
up
there.
by Peter Jackson.
Nope.
Oh. My bad.
Yeah, I mean, I just literally just saw Azog and I went, oh yeah, Azog, yeah. Or Azog. It's probably more accurate.
Azog the
Azog. It's probably Azog. Brandywine, Arnor. Yeah, so the annals of the kings and rulers, the Númenórean kings going forward. So it is possible, if they're keeping it in the context of the appendices, that's how they're doing the Second Age without having to extend the license. But Ironclad Enterprises got in trouble for that. Because Ironclad Enterprises tried to use the same thing, and they had the license for 18 years.
I gotta think.
Nobody had a license
I have to
longer.
believe the Tolkien estate has got to be involved in
I would hope
whatever's
so.
going down.
I would be so tickled if they finally gave permission to expand it like that.
No,
It'd be-
it makes sense, but
it'd be awesome if
Amazon
they
wouldn't. I don't think there's just no way that the expansion could happen without
I
Amazon.
wouldn't say there's no way.
Well, that seems like some pretty big loopholes
I
to
think
try
you
to get
underestimate
all
the
of
power
all
of their
Second
greed.
Age into.
Well, we'll find out over time. It's all conjecture.
You
All right. Do we want to read a letter and then we will go continue with Fall of Gondolin?
Mm.
Where do we leave
Sure.
off on
A
letters?
gondolin is
I have no
idea.
no reference point.
Let me pull up Brian's thingamajigger doohickey. What
He's
you
in
call
chat.
it.
You could ask him.
Yeah. Well, he would hear me asking that
oh.
right now.
I do have a reference point
Okay.
because my app keeps it 154-ish.
154-ish.
Is that? Oh, the letter you mean?
Okay, so you finished. Oh yeah, I've got a Doctor Who card in 155, 154.
Oh yeah, that's a clear.
Did we not finish 154?
No,
We
we
finished that one.
We
Okay,
finished
so
the
155
letters.
then.
Well, you must have went back in time and put it in the right spot for us.
Yes, this is a 1980.
This guy in
This
the
is a
guitar.
1980 Who, 1980 Doctor. Oh wait, that's not Doctor Who. It's just 1980 Who. 3450 limited edition pen. Oh, I think it's this. I think it's this pen here. I think that John gave me. Anyway, so 155 to Naomi Mitchison draft. Passage from a draft of the above letter, which was not included in the version actually sent. This includes discussion about magic in Middle Earth, magia versus Goetia. So this is important. I have a whole bunch of notes in mine because there's always been a debate about magic in Middle Earth. And you'll notice that the One Ring and AIM role-playing games avoid it by there are no spellcaster classes or any magic classes in the game. There are NPCs and there are magic items, but they don't really explain how it happens. So this whole letter pretty much is one of the better ones on magic in Middle Earth, the hotly debated topic. And if you want to read a lot more, you can read both Other Hands and Other Minds magazine and Merc.com, where I've got all of Professor Seaman and all the others discussions about different approaches to
Before we go on,
yeah.
okay, Chesterton, who was very influential on both C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, said that he believed that the miraculous nature of the world was magic, and he used the word loosely, which I think Tolkien would agree was what happened in his novels, is that the word magic got used loosely to reflect the idea of the miraculous in the sense of the word not. Because they're gonna talk about it. Galadriel kind of grumps at.
This is
at
all
the
part of the
hobbits.
debate.
Yeah.
There are, because Tolkien never fully defined it, and he went back and forth. So if you look on Merp.com, there's a whole section on magic in Middle Earth, and it tries to cite and Michael Martinez has written about this quite a bit too. So there's a lot of sources discussing and debating about magic in Middle Earth and how it should be represented.
Well, the problem is that the English language does not really have a word for what Tolkien was looking for.
Yes, and so Tolkien came up with 3 of them.
Exactly.
Enchantment, whatever.
Well, he uses the word enchantment
So
sometimes.
let's start reading this letter.
Whereas Lewis goes into miracles
Right.
in quite some detail.
Brian says, I too am cautiously optimistic about Silmarillion adaptation, but I did see that Peter Jackson actually might be considered for involvement. No. And he says that's not a joke. No. Observer.com, 2018-12, Amazon, Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson.
We can only forgive him so
HBO,
much.
Game of Thrones. Peter Jackson is now involved in Amazon's Lord of the Rings series, sort of. Brandon Katz, 120518. After HBO passed on a television adaptation of Lord of the Rings, Amazon swooped in with deep pockets and starry eyes. The ambitious streaming service is reportedly dropping a brain-bursting $1 billion on its journey to Middle-earth, which is expected to arrive in 2021 and will supposedly center on young Aragorn, though we have some alternatives.
Are you reading a link, or is
I'm reading this. This is from Brian.
Oh.
The big questions that Lord of the Rings fans keep asking: will Peter Jackson, director of the groundbreaking trilogy and less groundbreaking Hobbit movies, be returning? Writers J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay will be serving as showrunners, but Jackson's expertise in this world would go a long way, blah, 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 blah. On Tuesday night, Jackson revealed he will chip into Amazon's series in a background capacity. Quote, I don't know, I don't have thoughts on it because I haven't seen anything, he told the UK newspaper Metro, but I think they're going to send us some scripts to see if we can help them along. I wish them all the best if we can help them. We certainly will try. It's a big task. So that's okay if he's just, a consultant.
He's a script kiddie.
Yeah. That's a very different meaning. Yeah. All right, thanks for that, Brian. All right.
Who is it? Who is that reference?
You want me to go ahead and read this?
I'll read it.
Go ahead.
It's up to you. Whatever you want.
Hey, gang.
Hey, have a seat. So we're about to read one of Tolkien's letters, and this is one of the ones that covers magic in Middle-earth, which is a hotly debated topic.
I am... Well, yeah, but if he says, if Tolkien says,
It's good.
I'm afraid I've been far too casual about magic, and especially the use of the word. Though Galadriel and others show by the criticism of the mortal use of the word that the thought about it is not altogether casual, but it is a very large question. Is that the
Yeah, V mean
Very.
very large question and difficult, and a story which, as you so rightly say, is largely about motives, choice, temptations, etc., and the intentions for using whatever is found in the world could hardly be burdened with a pseudo-philosophical disquisition.
Exclamation mark.
What is a disquisition? Can somebody give me a definition?
I think
have no
that's
idea.
discourse, inquisition combined.
Okay. I do not intend to involve myself in any debate whether magic, in any real sense, is
Formal
really...
discussion or inquiry or discussion into a subject.
Does anybody
So,
expect
inquiry
Spanish
discussion.
disquisition?
Yeah, the Spanish disquisition.
Apparently we didn't expect the word. So nobody expects that one.
Magic in any sense is real or really possible in the world, but I suppose that for the purposes of this tale, some would say that there is a latent distinction, such as one would call the distinction between magia and
Gotea.
gotea.
Yeah.
Gotea? I don't know how to pronounce that. That's Latin, isn't it?
It looks more Greek-ish, I think.
We tend to use
I don't know. It could
both.
be. It doesn't matter.
Well, Galadriel speaks of the deceits of the enemy well enough, but magia could be was held good per se and Gotia bad. Neither
Yeah, sorcery basically is the difference.
neither is
And it's
in this tale good or bad. Well, isn't that the reason why he calls him a wizard instead of a sorcerer?
yes.
He calls him a wizard to really
Yeah.
mark the difference.
Keep going.
But only by motive or purpose or use. Both sides use both, but with different motives. The supremely bad motive is, for this tale, since it is specifically about it, domination of the other free wills. The enemy's operations are by no means all goetic deceits, but magic that produces real effects in the physical world. But his magia he uses to bulldoze both people and things, and his goetia to terrify and subjugate. Their magia, the elves and Gandalf used sparingly, a magia producing real results like fire in a wet faggot. For specific beneficent purposes, their goetic effects are entirely artistic and not intended to deceive. They never deceive elves, but may deceive or bewilder unaware men, since the difference is to them as clear as the difference is to us between fiction, painting, and sculpture and life. Both sides live mainly by ordinary means. The enemy, or those who have become like him, go in for the machinery with destructive and evil effects, because magicians who have become chiefly concerned to use magi for their own power would... Magia.
That is a different meaning.
Sorry, yeah. For their own power would do so. Do so?
Would do so, do so.
Do so. Sounds kind of silly. The basic motive for magi, quite apart from any philosophic consideration of how it would work, is immediacy, speed, reduction of labor, and reduction also to a minimum or vanishing point of the gap between the idea or desire and the result of the effect. But the magi may not be easy to come by, and at any rate, if you have command of abundant slave labor or machinery, often only the same thing concealed, it may be as quick or quick enough to push mountains over, wreck forests, or build pyramids by such means. Of course, another factor then comes in, a moral or pathological one. The tyrants lose sight of objects, become cruel, and like smashing, hurting, and defiling as such. It would no doubt be possible to defend poor Lotho's introduction of more efficient mills, but not of Sharkey and Sandyman's use of them. Anyway, a difference in the use of magic in this story is that it is not to become by lore or spells, but is an inherent power not possessed or attainable by men as such. Aragorn's healing might be regarded as magical, or at least a blend of magic with pharmacy and hypnotic processes. But it is, in theory, reported by the hobbits who have little notion of philosophy and science, while Aragorn is not a pure man, but at long remove one of the children of Luthien. Yeah.
And you missed earlier that they may be doing the second age for the Amazon series.
Oh.
The second age would be awesome.
It had
So footnote number 1 is Greek.
Oh, it was Greek.
Yeah, this is it's Greek, and it's goti for sorcerer. The English form goti is defined in the OED as quote, witchcraft or magic performed by the invocation and employment of evil spirits, necromancy, end quote.
This dichotomy he's going for kind of reminds me of technology in the way technology itself is neutral.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
How you use it defines you as good or evil.
And the second footnote is alongside the final paragraph, Tolkien has written, but the Númenóreans used, quote, spells and quote, in making swords, question mark. Remember the special Numenorian swords and such. So, so he's still debating with himself. And in later letters here, because I've got it all highlighted for all the magic stuff, he goes into greater depth about Theia and Kroa, body versus spirit versus these different things as part of different types of magic. So thoughts and comments on that. So Shane, welcome. He was just over there jamming. He just finished. I know you just jumped in the middle of this, but thoughts and questions, we welcome any that you have.
Well, one of the first things that sticks out to me, at least from my own personal perspective, one of the reasons that I, for myself, enjoyed all the Tolkien stories and why I think they resonated with a lot of people is that, magic is not a commonplace thing, whether it's for good or ill, it's a very surprising thing. So that in itself kind of sets the stage that, most people cannot do magic. And, the times that it's done, either, you're doing it for a good purpose and, those kind of things are kind of like accepted magic. And, almost without exception, anybody who does dark, evil, bad magic, they come to a bad fall at some point. But as far as you were talking about the people making the swords, that could almost be debated as, people in the Middle Ages, someone who didn't understand blacksmithing and someone who's really good at the understanding of physics and balance and stuff could make these really good swords. They might seem magical, they're just of high quality.
Comes back to Asimov's or whoever it was that said, any sufficiently advanced technology would seem like magic.
Well, that would...
Like the Japanese samurai swords.
Sure. I think Tolkien would be a little bit apoplectic if somebody referred to magic as just an advanced form of science. I mean, in his book, he jokingly says that elves are more natural than men because, by definition, the magic that happens within his story is built within the specific rules that his
the Song of Arda
inhabit his world, and so in a weird way, we might think magic is fantastic. Go ahead.
You cannot disobey the laws of physics.
Brian did say, by the way, from earlier, Jackson says, quote, I was a guy who didn't get to see The Lord of the Rings like everybody else because I had to make it. So I'm looking forward to seeing somebody else's take on the Tolkien world. Hear, hear. And then Brian says, for pronunciation, it's Magia and Goitia. So it emphasis on the G and the T. And then Brian says, I agree. Magic would be astonishing by definition in Middle Earth.
And Lewis also kind of deals with miracles on several levels of common miraculous and then extra miraculous.
Well, that's another thing I was thinking, that some of the stuff that happens throughout the stories, I wouldn't necessarily put it as magic, but it's like the combined faith of a certain group of people made certain things happen. So then, are we talking about magic, or are we talking about divine miracles then?
For example, the stone of
Stone of Scone?
the oath breakers. Eric, the stone of Eric, that led to the paths of the dead that Aragorn had to go because they didn't come to the summit when they were supposed to.
Yeah.
So they were doomed to not die. Right. That entire people, the oath breakers, because they broke their oath, the power of oath, the power of words are so significant, and in the context of the Song of Arda, nobody cast a spell on them that made them all turn into undead. Instead, when it came time to die, they were never, they didn't go to the halls of Mandos or any of that, and are in their rotting corpses until the king could come, the person who could come as per the fate of the oracle, not the oracle, but the writ of the prophecy that included Aragorn. Deep roots are not reached by the frost, blah 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 blah. But that he would come and let them finally fulfill their oath, which then he brought them up the sea through the Bay of Peligir and brought them to fight in the Pelennor Fields and such. That there wasn't like a spellcasting thing. It was you broke the rules according to the Song of Arda, and now you have the consequences. And there wasn't a science factor to it, and there wasn't spellcasting to it. It was inherent to the rules of Tolkien's physics, if you will, because it's the Song of Arda, the Song of Creation. And words have power, and names have power, and oaths have power. The oath of Feanor and the curse that laid upon all of the Noldori because of that. Just words, right? They did not cast a spell, but because they swore an oath, it bound them, as though it were in D&D terms, some sort of guise or something that a spell was cast, but wasn't necessary because it was just part of the essence of existence of Ea.
And we say the same thing in programming. Bind.
Yes.
By the power of Java, I bind thee.
There's also the sense that there is a power.
Binding resources.
There's a power to art. There's a power to art and beauty. And what I mean by that is that you see the moment when they're frozen in time, when they meet each other, Baron and Luthien, in the forest. There's that moment where they're caught, and so there's this idea that there's moments where they seem very significant moments. There's enchantment, and the enchantment is not them casting spells or whatever, but it's a matter of being caught in beauty that arrests the people who are involved in it.
Richard, do you have anything you'd like to apply?
We're, as a culture, we're very casual about words. And Tolkien was from a different era where you were careful about your words.
I guess I'm a little bit antiquated in that, like this whole debate over, I'm having a debate with people online about 2 T's or 1 T's for TRPG for an acronym, right? TTRPG versus TRPG. And for me, it's a pet peeve to have 2 T's. It's completely unnecessary differentiation and an extra letter to an acronym that's already long enough and an extra syllable when you say it. TTRPG versus TRPG. And because to me, it's a clarity, it's important. And from an academic and a professional and a theoretical model, it's important to have consistent referencing terms. And when you use them just kind of haphazardly and they lose meaning, like RPG now, is originally only meant Dungeons and Dragons and all those types of role-playing games that were played at a tabletop.
Right.
Now when you use RPG, it changes between the cohort. If I say it to somebody who was around gaming in the 70s, 80s, they usually think D&D type games. If I say it to somebody in the 80s and 90s, they often think LARP, live action role-play. If I say it to somebody 90s onward, they usually think video games. And I've done this. I've done this at conferences left and right where they're not fandom. These are professional conferences, medical conferences, etc. And I say, when I say the term role-playing game, what do you think of? And then they raise their hand and speak up. How many agree with that? And if they're below a certain age, it's computer-based. If they're above a certain age, it's LARP. And if they're above a certain age, it's tabletop. The meaning has changed.
Isn't the source of that for most of those people that you were asking for their children and not personal experience with them?
No, that's usually their. So the cohort effect is their personal experience. So usually, if they're older, it's what they saw in the media in the '80s. If they weren't gamers themselves, which most of them were not. So it was what the media called it and what they became aware of. It's what they were aware of, and that's what they think of. So anyway, so these words change in meaning even though they didn't really change. And so for me, it's trying to establish a theoretical model. It's important there's that precision. With Tolkien, it's much more the essence of it, right? And of course, he was able to take into account the evolution of meaning of his words. He had the etymology, words evolve and change, and he created the stories to do that. Now, Brian says here, there's a category of marvelous, which overlaps with magical, but is not limited to it. Something made with great skill could be marvelous. Also, you have the overlap. Celebrimbor and the elves of Eregion could not rise to the height of their craft without Anatar's, that's Sauron, gift-bringer, tutelage, and smithcraft as a Maiar. So the 3 rings were then made by Celebrimbor as a Noldoran smith by both magic, his elven abilities, and lore given by Anatar, which he learned. and the rules of the Song of Arda. Right? They're trying to bind this energy and capabilities from the Song of Arda. And one of the key things that seems to come up throughout is the more grievously you go against the natural course of the song, as Morgoth loved to do, Morgoth essence, which Tolkien talks about Morgoth essence from time to time, the more grievously the song reacts, if you will. Creation reacts more severely the more you go against the song versus with it. Mm-hmm. Elves and such working with nature, with it seems magical, but they're often just kind of working with the song and enhancing it. Tolkien, Gandalf did it where he didn't throw a fireball, he lit a pine cone and then threw the flaming pine cone, which then spread and caught the dogs, and he enhanced it. But he wasn't this D&D style wielding magic. It was all enhancement. Whereas you hear Sauron and Morgoth bringing forth huge powers and flinging things around grievously, which was very much Morgoth's way. When the song of creation was being done, brazen horns and drums, and right, he was intentionally rebelling and trying to make all this dissonance and difference and everything, which then
Iluvatar he was trying to subvert the song, wasn't he?
Right, to his will. He's trying to make it his way.
It always goes well.
And eventually, after the third time, Iluvatar said, "Right, that's enough. Now you can see what you made." Brian says, "Great conversation about power and enchantment. We need to look at the legendarium of Middle-earth as including a spectrum between ordinary and awesome. And within Tolkien's faith perspective, he would have been influenced by the idea of the supernatural, which imbues the natural but does not cancel it."
One thing I kind of, one of the things that always struck me with, especially when I read the books the first time as a kid, that I think a lot of Sauron's power came from, there were a lot of people that wanted nothing to do with him, but they were still conscious of him and aware of him and believed in his power, whether they wanted him to succeed or not. And just that power of this group belief of all these beings across, it's like there's some kind of karmic energy that for good or ill feeds his power.
Are you kind of talking about a psychic just?
I don't think Tolkien does that. So there was, with Morgoth essence, so for example, when Sauron convinced the Númenóreans to start worshipping Morgoth, right? They started doing the sacrifices before the fall of Númenor. So they created the temples, they were burning people, and he kept trying to convince our Pharazôn, the emperor of Númenor at the time, if you do these things, you will become immortal, blah, 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 blah.
Well,
but it was a scam.
I wasn't talking about that kind of belief. It's just that, everyone's heard of Sauron, everyone's afraid of him, and it's like he feeds on that fear and makes him stronger.
See, I think that's a Peter Jackson
I think he's
thing.
trying to describe a subconscious Jasalt.
I'm thinking that would be a Celtish thing.
Yeah, but I don't think Tolkien in his setting had that. I know exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
There's lots of mythologies that say that.
Yeah.
I don't remember Tolkien ever suggesting that the more people that he put under his will, in fact, it was the opposite. It was the opposite, actually, of what you're saying. So that mythology is the more people you have under your will, the stronger you become because of their psychic collective energy and such.
Not necessarily under his will, but it's just...
Well, his fear, whatever, acknowledgement, worship, whatever.
And maybe I'm looking at it from a more of a Hindu perspective, because, there's some gods that are like the god of this street, all the way up to Ganesh.
Yeah.
Depending on who,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So the Maiar, remember, the Valar existed before there were any people.
Okay.
And Morgoth was a Valar.
Okay.
Who decided to take, first he was an Ainur who decided to take mortal-ish form. He decided to have some kind of form as a Valar in the world of Ea. There are others who never came to be. And as he did things to the world, and then as he subjected his will over orcs and other creatures, created them and subjected them, it weakened him. He had to put his essence into them, right? Same with Sauron and the rings, right? They put their essence into it, and it actually weakened them because they had to expend that energy rather than the more orcs Morgoth had, he did not become stronger. He actually became more diffused.
Well, and Fëanor,
because he had to, he was spread out trying to control them. And remember, when Sauron fell and the others fell, the orcs went up, then they turn on each other,
Like
right?
too little better.
But-
Yeah.
Spread over
but
too
Fëanor
much.
Exactly.
Fëanor had the same issue. Remember, his
Yeah.
mother died because she gave birth
Right. All
to
of her
Fëanor.
energy
All
was put
that
into him,
energy
exactly.
was put, and then he.
So it's kind of the opposite of the typical, because usually you hear that like with a more word, the video game Black and White, right? The idea is to get more followers so you become a more powerful deity.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about followers because I mean, there's a lot of people who didn't,
Yeah,
follow
I just don't think he
Sauron,
did anything about psychic energy.
but they definitely feared him. And I'm just as the series progressed, you know, people are getting more hopeless and whatever. He seemed to grow stronger, and it was more like an Achilles heel thing that got him because you know the ring finally being
Well, it was
destroyed.
hubris.
Yeah,
But he didn't. No, he didn't. He was Sauron before the ring was, and Morgoth were stronger
mm-hmm.
than later Sauron, and especially when Sauron lost the ring, was much weaker. Right? I mean, lost his after the fall of Numenor, he could never take on solid
He
form
put
again.
he put a part of himself in the ring,
Yeah.
obviously, right?
Yeah.
But the point that Tolkien was making was that small things mattered in terms of defeating the enemy. That was what the point of the ring, you
And
know,
the hobbits.
the hobbits going through this
Something
hell,
significant, yeah.
hell to get rid of something that was incredibly small.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of the scope of everything, you know, it was the, you know, you could call it the Achilles heel, but it really was meant to.
So it was always his hubris that was his Achilles heel.
Also,
Yeah.
the hobbits weren't significant on the world stage. That
Yeah.
was another.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just kind of looking at it from because like in the Hobbit, you know, he was there, people talking, but he wasn't really like this big presence. But by the time we're at the last book of,
It's kind of hard to so realize that The Hobbit was not originally written as part of Lord of the Rings.
oh yeah,
He reworked The Hobbit to better fit Lord of the Rings after he wrote Lord of the Rings to make it have a better consistency. But it was loosely based on what he had in the back of his head, but it was really a standalone story. Even though he was drawing on these things loosely, he only went back in later editions and made it more consistently link up with that. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize that context that.
yeah.
That he actually reworked The Hobbit to fit the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
better
it
because
was
didn't
for
fit well.
originally for Christopher as a child.
Well, for his kids and what have you, and it just kind of grew organically that way.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys wanted to say on that? Do you want to go
Well,
ahead
we're
and
still
do our-
talking about magic, though. I think that magic is in Tolkien's because he was a poet, because he wanted it to. I think that you have to remember that it's the poet sensibilities that are really. I mean, when he talks about at the end of the King returns. Sorry, the Return of the King, and he's talking about and the silver veil will be pulled back. You know, he's talking about the boats going over to Numenor. I mean, not Numenor. I'm sorry. Where the elves
Undying
are.
Lands.
The Undying
Come
Lands.
on, yeah.
Right. And the whole point is that is a metaphor for death that he's talking about when he's talking about the boats crossing over into this
Well, it was
unseen.
to the Spirit Lands, but it's a little different than like the Halls of Mandos. Halls of Mandos was death.
Right. But the whole point of it was a very poetic.
Sure.
It was more. It's more over the top and more seen at the end of the Return of the King than you really see it in like the Silmarillion and so on and so forth. But my point being is the mythopoetic side of it that makes magic work in his world is not so easily like we want to draw boxes around what it is.
I would really highly recommend reading, of course, Michael Martinez's view on magic in Middle Earth. He has writes about it multiple times. Professor Chris Siemens' view of it, but especially Osric in Other Mind magazine, which is freely available at other-minds.net. Or actually, otherminds.net. he does a whole series on Magic in Middle Earth and pulls all these sources in and really covers it quite well. Now, again, it's done for gamers to try to figure out how to do Magic in Middle Earth, but he covers all of these philosophical concepts using Tolkien as the primary, and then all these other sources that we can draw in. It's one of the best, I think, treatises on Magic in Middle Earth. So definitely check that out from Osric in Other Minds magazine if you really want to go deeper. Brian says, Namarie, to my friends, I'm off to the hospital. Okay, Brian, all the best to you and your family. Hoping things are getting better. Shall we go ahead and read from, with the time we have left, continue the Fall of Gondolin? Sure. Chris, you want to take that away?
That was page 50.
Probably the bottom of
The
it.
bottom paragraph. Then Veronway spoke to the guard of the Gondolithim, and his speech they comprehended, for it was the sweet tongue of the gnomes. Then spoke Tuor also and questioned where they might be, and who might the folk in arms who stood about, for he was in a maze and wondered much at the goodly fashion of their weapons. Then it was said to him by one of the company, We are the guardians of the issue of the way of escape. Rejoice that ye have found it, for behold, before you the city of 7 names, where all who war with Melko may find hope.
Melko was more off.
Then said Tuor, What be those names? And the chief of the guard made answer, It is said, and it is son. Here's fun. Gondobar am I called, and Gondolimbar, city of stone and city of the dwellers in stone, Gondolin, the stone of song, and Guaristrin am I named, and the tower of guard, Garthurion, or the secret place, for I am hidden from the eyes of Melko. But they who love me most greatly call me Loth, for like a flower am I, even Lothengriel, the flower that blooms on the plain. Yet, said he, in our daily speech, we speak and we name it mostly Gondolin. Then said Veronway, Bring us thither, for we fain would enter. And Tuor said that his heart desired much to tread the ways of that fair city.
Richard, you want to?
You're gonna make me read for a living, huh? Here I thought I'd just chill out and zombie.
So, then said the chief.
Then said the chief of the guard that they themselves must abide here, for there were yet many days of their moon to pass, but that Veronway and Tuor might pass on to Gondolin, and moreover that they would need thereto no guide, for lo, it stands fair to see, and very clear, and its towers prick the heavens above the hill of the watch in the midmost plain. Then Tuor and his companion fared over the plain that was of a marvelous level, broken but here and there by boulders round and smooth, which lay amid a sward, and by pools and rocky beds. Many fair pathways lay across that plain, and they came after a day's light march into the foot of the hill of the Watch, which is in the tongue of the Nolde Amon Garwath. Did I get that right? Garth? Wareth. Then did they begin to ascend the winding stairways which climbed up to the city gate, nor might any one reach that city save on foot, and espied from the walls. As the westward gate was golden in the last sunlight, did they come upon the long stairs' head, and many eyes gazed upon them in the battlements and towers. But Tuor looked upon the walls of stone and the uplifted towers, upon the glistening pinnacles of the town, and he looked upon the stairs of stone and marble, bordered by slender Basterlades, and cooled by the leap of the thread-like waterfall seeking the plain from the fountains of Amon Gorwer. Yeah. And he fared as one in some dreams of the gods, for he seemed not such things were seen by men in the visions of their sleep, so great was his amaze at the glory of Gondolin. Should I pass the book?
Shane, do you want to read?
Sure.
I've got a copy of it.
Oh, okay. Even so came they to the gates, Tour in wonder, and Goronway in great joy that daring much he had both brought Tour hither in the wheel of Ulmo, and had himself thrown off the yoke of Melko forever. Though he hated him no wise less, no longer did he tread that evil one with a binding terror. And of a sooth that spell which Melko held over the Noldoli was one of bottomless dread, so that he seemed ever nigh them, even were they far away from the hells of iron, and their hearts quaked, and they fled not even when they could, and to this Melko trusted often. Can we keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. Now is there a sally from the gates of Gondolin, and a throng comes about these twain in wonder, rejoicing that yet another of the Nodali has fled hither from Melko, and marveling at the stature and great limbs of Tuor, his heavy spear barbed with fishbone and his great harp. Rugged was his aspect, and his locks were unkempt, and he was clad in the skins of bears. It is written that in those days the fathers of men were of less stature than men are now, and the children of Elfinus of greater growth. Yet was Tuor taller than any that stood there. Indeed, the Gondolin were not bent aback, as some of their unhappy kin became, laboring without rest at delving and hammering for Melko. But small were they and slender and very lithe. They were swift of foot and surpassing fair, sweet and sad were their mouths, and their eyes had ever a joy within quivering to tears. For in those times the gnomes were exiles at heart, haunted with a desire for their ancient homes that faded not. But fate and unconquerable eagerness after knowledge had driven them into far places, and now were they hemmed by Melko, and must make their biding as fair as they might by labor and by love.
Was that included in the original? In the
Well,
the final.
This is a little different version than what was in the Silmarillion.
The part, but like the part about him wearing his appearance, was his appearance even discussed
Who, Melko?
in the no. Yeah, Tour.
Dorwan
I'm
Way.
talking about
Tour,
Tour.
about his height? I don't
Well,
remember.
I mean his height, but they say his locks were unkempt and he had a big spear. Was that
Yeah, that I think was. I think that was part of his visit, yeah. I think that was.
okay?
No, he had the set of armor that was left.
Oh, he had
at
the dragon helm.
I think the ones about the spear and the unkept locks is Varwan Way.
Oh, is it?
I don't remember. I haven't read the Silmarillion in a while, so. Where are we at?
All right. So labor by love, is that what we're in?
Yep.
How it came ever that among men the Nodoli have been confused with the orcs who are Melko's goblins, I know not. Unless it be that certain of the Nodoli were twisted to the evil of Melko and mingled among these orcs. For all that race were bred by Melko of the subterranean heats and slime. Their hearts were of granite and their bodies deformed, foul their faces which smiled not, but their laugh that of the clash of metal, and to nothing were they more fain than to aid in the basest of the purposes of Melko. The greatest hatred was between them and the Nodoli, who named them Glamhoth, or folk of dreadful hate. Behold, the armed guardians of the gate pressed back the thronging folk that gathered about the wanderers, and one among them spoke, saying, This is a city of watch and ward, Gondolin on Amanwereth, where all may be free who are of true heart, but none may be free to enter unknown. Tell me then your names. But Voronwë named himself Bronweg of the Gnomes, come hither by the will of Ulmo as guide to the Son of Man. And Tuor said, I am Tuor, son of Peleg, son of Indor, of the house of the Swan of the sons of the men of the north who live far hence, and I fare hither by the will of Ulmo of the outer oceans. Then all who listened grew silent, and his deep and rolling voice, okay, so I'm supposed to be doing deep and rolling voice, sorry, and his deep and rolling voice held them in amaze, for their own voices were fair as the plash of fountains. Then a saying arose among them, lead him before the king. Then did the throng return within the gates, and the wanderers with them, and Tuor saw they were of iron and of great height and strength. Now the streets of Gondolin were paved with stone and wide curbed with marble, and fair houses and courts amid gardens of bright flowers were set about the ways, and many towers of great slenderness and beauty, builded of white marble and carved most marvelously, rose to the heaven. Squares there were lit with fountains, and the home of birds there sang amid the branches of their aged trees. But of all these, the greatest was that place where stood the king's palace, and the tower thereof was the loftiest in the city, and the fountains that played before the doors shot 20 fathoms and 7 in the air, and fell in a singing rain of crystal. Therein did the sun glitter splendidly by day, and the moon most magically shimmered by night. The birds that dwelt there were of the whiteness of snow, and their voices sweeter than a lullaby of music. Corey, do you want to continue?
Well, those were two trees, one that bore blossom of gold and the other of silver, nor did they ever fade, for they were the shoots of old from the glorious trees of Valinor that lit those places before Melko and Gloomweaver withered them. Is this in the final draft?
I don't. We don't know.
The
Just
golden.
sit there and literally
I
decide
don't remember. I'm sorry. I just didn't remember the.
I don't believe the
You'll
Fall
have
of
to go back and
Gondolin is
reread
in.
the Silmarillion version.
I don't
to
think
see.
it is in the Silmarillion.
Okay,
Because this is like a cutting off of
so
those
go
two
and finish
trees.
that sentence and we'll call it good.
Okay. At Valinor that lit the place before Melko and Gloomweaver withered them, and those trees the Gondolithim named Glingol and Bansil.
So that was Laurelin and Torlin. So these are again earlier drafts before he standardized all of that. So cool though, huh?
Would have been interesting
Such
if
an
they
epic
had.
place.
It would be interesting if they had those two tree, little tree pieces of the tree growing in the city.
What's the
Right.
What's
Well,
the
that's where
parentage of
Nimloth
the
and all of that.
What's the parentage of the tree?
The white tree of
tree?
Numenor and everything. Yeah, it's supposed to go up through. It's supposed to have some sort. I forget the full parentage, but I thought that was an offshoot all the way down from the seed of England
From
or something.
the two
I forget
trees of
which.
light.
Well, I think from one of them. I think from the, but I'm not sure. I'd have to refresh. I've forgotten. So, a reminder: this year's Tolkien theme is Gondolin and a great sword. A sword of note. That's what we voted for last year. So the adventure that Brian and Drake and I we have to come up with is an adventure that involves Gondolin and a sword of worth.
The sword.
Are we talking about a sword of note or a sword of short note?
That's a sword of great worth. A sword of considerable notability. So, thank you for joining us. Remember, the third Saturday of each month, we're here from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific time. We meet here in Spokane, but you are welcome to join us anywhere around the world. The recordings are uploaded to youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars. Our website is tolkienscholars.org. We are on Twitch under @Tolkien Scholars. We don't really use Facebook anymore. Never really liked it very much to begin with. So the best way is tolkienscholars.org to find all of our contact info. And join up. You can also join us through Meetup. And membership is free. It is recommended that you do pay membership to the UK Tolkien Society to be an official member. We are an official Smile, a chapter of the UK Tolkien Society. Wherever you may be well, and Namarie.
Namaste.
Namaste.